Hello, everyone. Welcome to In Full View, focusing on trans masks in media, the podcast, where we shine a light on the lack of trans masculine representation in entertainment. We're your hosts, Avi Roque.
And Yas Moderes Kasiri.
And our guest today is Maze Felix, a multidisciplinary artist, dancer, and actor known for their work in indie film and their advocacy for adoptees and intersectional storytelling. For listeners who may not be familiar, tell us about yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Maze Felix. My pronouns are they, he, and as Avi said, I do many things: multi-hyphenate, multidisciplinary, actor, model, dancer, social advocate, and then outside of entertainment and industry, I also am an ASL interpreter. Yeah, my work with all of them are deeply interconnected with one another. Some of my core values are very, very intersectional, and whenever I'm in each of the work, it still is relevant to other work that I'm in.
I love that. And I've always loved that, how much of an advocate you are, not just for trans and queerness, but also like being an adoptee advocate. You're an ASL interpreter, so in the disability space. So I'm curious, was there a point where, like, did you have like a fork in the road where you're like, I can go down this, like, I can be an advocate professionally, or like I can do it through art or become, this is a crazy way I'm phrasing this question, I apologize. By this time the listeners understand I have ADHD, but was there a moment where maybe you were like, which route do I want to go? And was there a way where you found art and performance was more impactful or just fulfilling? Please elaborate.
Yeah, I mean, this question I could even date back all the way to my childhood, but a specific pivotal moment was during the pandemic. As a kid, I was raised in an environment that didn't always support an artistic career for myself, even though my brain and my passion lies in creativity, and I naturally gravitate and really love it. And advocacy, also just living with multiple identities and intersectional experiences, I have always kind of been naturally, even as a young child, seeking spaces where my identities were affirmed and uplifted because of the environment that I grew up in. And as a trans person, as an adoptee person, as also ADHD, I'm also autistic, so ADHD, neurospicy person, I think in an creative acting point, I feel like I've always been an actor because I've been in places where I've had to mask, I've had to mold into someone that I was expected to be. So I grew up acting essentially for my entire life. But in terms of career-wise, I was expected to pursue, believe it or not, a science or math major, which I did and did not work out, obviously, because my brain doesn't work that way. But the pivotal moment was during the pandemic. I was in the middle of getting my second degree, which is ASL interpreting, and everything had shut down. As we all know, everything kind of became online, and I was also experiencing another fork in the road with my gender. That was where I also had my top surgery during the pandemic. I was in a relationship that wasn't great for me or supportive for me with my gender. And so I felt very, very lost and stuck. Most of my life I had felt that, but specifically, I know that many of us, because of quarantine, felt that. That was a moment for all of us where we had to make choices.
We might be on a similar timeline. I transitioned during the pandemic
yeah.
too.
I was like similar,
Yeah.
like anniversaries, most likely.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Yeah, about
4.5 years. Okay.
4.5 years. So it was,
What years was?
yeah, so it's like a year into it so I guess it was probably like 2021. Okay. So I think during the pandemic I was this is the time. And you spent a lot of time alone with yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what I was going to say. I said, what a time where people really had to sit in discomfort and with themselves and ask questions. I feel like my transition had already settled by that time, but what came out of my pandemic moment was voiceover and voice acting. So, yeah, I feel like that was a discovery and a thing for me. But I've heard a lot of that, of like people transitioning in the pandemic, people transitioning, people breaking up,
A lot of
Right, right.
divorces.
a lot of
Yeah.
During the
divorces.
didn't go through that,
Mhm.
Yeah.
but definitely had lots of challenges within that. Um,
Yes,
Yeah, there's
of
something
course.
where like you couldn't hide in your, like, for a lot of people you couldn't hide in your work anymore.
right.
You actually had to like be either with that person all the time or with yourself. And I think also there's something about like, a lot of death that's kind of
hmm
like, well, is this the rest of my, if this happened now, would I be fulfilled? So,
Yeah, I felt like the word death really resonates because I felt like there was both a death and a rebirth for me during the pandemic. It kind of, that also kind of triggers a memory of just, in a creative sense, I did grow up with music. I grew up classically trained with piano and violin, and that's where I had a creative outlet. And then in the pandemic, I started to write myself, and then I moved into, I took an acting class. I told myself that I not only wanted a hobby, I needed to do something creatively as something that I could have beyond just a career thing with ASL. And so I did that. And then I also said I need to have top surgery. So those were the two things that I really, really pursued during the pandemic. And then it was the my top surgery was August of 2020, so like right in the heart of when everything was really shut down. And yeah, I with music, I feel like I love still, like that's still a big part of me, and I have another relationship to that. But with writing and acting, I really wanted to find like my own voice. Just with my lived experiences, I felt like I was living for someone else's voice, and then also as an ASL interpreter, I was literally interpreting other people's like personal stories and, for other people. And so for me, I wanted something that I could also like put myself in, see myself in, but in a creative way, in a collaborative way. So that was the moment where I was like, okay, I'm going to start this as a hobby. I think your question was about as a career. I never went in thinking that this will be a career or I must have this as a career. I've always made it intentional where if it's going to ever be a career, I need to really enjoy it. And so I didn't put that pressure on myself because I knew that it could have been a really toxic place for me to be in. And I have done that with other careers, it did put too much pressure. So I was like, if I'm going to, I did naturally really enjoy it. I did love, like, it picked up really like swiftly for me, and it makes sense because creative minds, creative world, it's like oxygen for me. But I I still remind myself, like, do I really enjoy this? Does this matter? Does the art that I make matter? And if all the answers are yes, then I continue to do that. So thankfully, it turned into a career while I still enjoyed it, and I've continued to be able to do that. So yeah, I ask those questions over and over.
I love that you have that, like, the check-in with yourself to, like, as you're going through it, because I think that's something where as artists, it's hard because, like, it comes from this place of, like, "Oh, this is we're passionate and we love it." And I feel like a lot of people, I only had one acting teacher, whoever, it was Killian, and I can't remember his last name, but all teachers, it was the commercial teacher, who's the only teacher who's ever been, "Really ask yourself if you want this, because you don't wanna wake up, like, in 20 years and decide it's not worth it, and it hasn't been worth it because of how much you have to sacrifice and give up and how hard this career can be." Because I feel like a lot of acting teachers can get kind of culty and like, oh, do you really want it? Like, are you really going for it? Don't be a quitter. Don't give up, because they want their monthly check. So, and I think it is really important to ask yourself that, because I think a lot of people after college, especially those of us who like went to college for like the arts and then you go into it as a career, I think a lot of people are like, oh, wait a second. This is different. Now it's a job, and there's no job on the face of the planet where you go to work every day and you're like, I love every aspect of this. And so I think it's really good as artists to check in with ourselves, because we do sacrifice a lot, especially I feel like in entertainment, because we have to work on other people's schedules, and like it can get really crazy when you're on set and like touring.
Yeah.
But can I say what I loved about what Maze did was you entered saying this isn't pressure of a career. I'm going to do this and I'm going to make money doing this. You came into it from a place of pure joy and from a place of saying this makes me happy. I love doing this and I'm here for it. And if it turns into something, great. But I'm not expecting that outcome, which I think is something I resonate with, more so on the side of like social media, like trying to build a brand on social media or be a presence. Every influencer I've come in contact with is like, you know what? Don't go into it because you're like, I want to make money and I'm going to be rich off of social media. Put content out because you love it and it's fun. And then maybe see how it unfolds. But it's hard sometimes. So I just wanted to comment on that I do love your approach.
Thank you. Yeah, in many ways, my younger Mays would have loved to have been able to have that opportunity, which I just didn't, to act sooner. I mean, I would have, I call myself like the theater kid. I often get asked if I've done theater as a kid, and it makes sense. But I basically the theater kid who never got to be the theater kid. And now I'm the theater kid as an adult. And I'm really like leaning into that. But in some ways I wish I had that experience, but also in other ways, I don't resent any of the experiences that I did have because of my history of education. If I had pursued the arts in college, I would have put that pressure on myself. And I know that I would not have enjoyed it as much as I do now. And I'm so grateful that, yeah, I did enter it in this way.
I think it's a good reminder for listeners too that they're like the thing I love about the arts is like it's not like a sport where it's like if you're 45 and you want to be a gymnast like at the Olympics, I'm not gonna say it's not impossible, but because there are a lot of people who never had the chance or maybe they did go to school for it but then something came up where they're like, hey, I have to prioritize my like financial security or take care of a parent or whatever comes up, that there's no wrong time to come to the arts. I think it's an important reminder. But before we dive too deep into the questions, I know you mentioned how you were brought up and like your identities. Would you mind sharing maybe with listeners a little bit about that to give them some context of how you identify and how your identity maybe wasn't reflective in your where you grew up?
Yes, oh my gosh. So my identities are going to be multi-hyphenate as well. Literally multi-hyphenate. So I am queer, transmasculine, non-binary, transracial, transnational, adoptee, ADHD, neurospicy, Chinese. I'm trying to think of any other hyphenate identities. I have said on our panel at Comic-Con that we've all done together that overall I just feel like a twink. Like everything together. That's the summary. But with the hyphenate, that's how I feel. And I think I grew up in a household that had every single identity was opposite of me. And I also was coming to terms with everything at once my entire life, both with my culture, with my own race, growing up in a white household, with my gender and sexuality at separate times. And then definitely at one point, it was conflated, especially earlier in the years when I didn't know the difference between gender and sexuality. And I thought for a while that they were each different, separate parts of me that I had to focus on. And it wasn't until I got into like my mid 20s where I realized, oh, they're all connected. And I look back and in hindsight, I really was grappling with every single identity at once, which is a lot for a young child who grew up in the Midwest in a home that is so like it just there's no one that looks like me, and the environment that I'm in is there's no representation for me. It's very, very lonesome. And so I definitely was in a place, especially in my early teens, where I was really seeking community, and it took a while to find it.
Yeah. Was there anyone that you had growing up though that you could be like, "Oh, that's my buddy or my friend or like somebody you could, I don't know. Did you have that person at all?"
Well, I mean, it actually, you asked that question. It's so interesting because like one I did, and it was mostly I did the ones that I had in person were essentially ones that were curated by my parents. I had those people, but they weren't actually people I chose. But then that question reminded me of who were the ones that were actually the ones that I chose and that felt like community but weren't necessarily there in person. It actually was things I saw in the media and like how um you know sometimes I look back and I'm like, wow, I was also still acting even if I wasn't doing it actively. I often would watch things starting from, the movie Annie, and I would place myself in the movie and put myself in a different timeline or in a different storyline within that story and just be in my own head. Many of my core memories, because this is what I would do a lot as a kid, my parents would be driving in the car and we'd be going to church or going to a relative's house, and I would be in the back seat and listening to music, and I would just play music that I would think that would be the soundtrack to my life, and I would imagine me in a movie that I was thinking about and going through that entire movie with that soundtrack in my head. So yeah, those were the people. Like it was fictional characters. It was my own fictional character of myself. I also did that with people I just saw on the street. I would look at just different dynamics of relationships or family dynamics and put myself there in their community and play out scenarios.
That's wild. Like almost like imagination was your form of survival
Yeah.
and coping.
And storytelling with the imagination, it sounds like, which is it's really it's really cool because I know a question I think I've asked on the panel, which we have for this, but it's interesting getting more context. That's just why I was excited to do the podcast. Um, you know, when you're I'm gonna go out on a limb and just say, like, it sounds like there probably aren't a lot of roles that really reflect who you are. So it feels like there's like a possibly a gap in roles that feel representative of who you are, right? Because I feel like there's probably I don't know what it's like to be a cishet white man, but I imagine those actors probably get roles where you're like, oh, this is just like me, or this is just like my friend, like to a T. I don't feel like I've necessarily seen roles like that come in for me where I'm like, ah, yes, I'm exactly this person. So I'm curious, do you feel like there's that gap? And if there is, how do you approach those roles?
Yeah, such a poignant question and something I know that so many of us resonate. I know that I'm preaching to the choir, but yeah, when yes, most roles. The simple answer is yes. You get roles that definitely have a similar identity or one of my identities that I share. But I think as a whole, I do feel like I am always leaving one or if not more the rest of the identities outside of the door and really focusing on one. And there's been very, very few opportunities where I've been able to be everything and anything. I had that experience, but I want more of it. I know we all want more of it. We need it. Um, how I approach it, I know that I've talked about this on the panel a little bit, but
Which, let's do a little shout out. Maze is one of our other OG panelists from the transmasculine representation and entertainment panels at the Comic Cons. So we have always loved having Maze on the panels. So we just love your story and who you are. So that's why you're here.
Yes, yeah. And like Avi said, the OG, the first one back at LA Comic Con back in, what was that, like years ago?
I was like, I'm getting like all gooey and like reminiscent. The OGs, yeah, that's it's been so special and also just like cultivate even a friendship outside of those spaces with you both. I think it's the connection and our community and even just like our panel itself is it's so palpable to the audience and people who come to it. Yeah. Yeah, so like whenever I approach a character, both in an audition or once I get a role, I really love to do it in a collaborative sense. I'll focus more on like booking a role. if it's a role that there has most roles that I've booked, there's always an identity that is left behind or is not as highlighted. But for me, that doesn't necessarily mean that I, as Maze, as the actor who's playing the character, has to leave that identity behind. And I really love my favorite part of the process of acting is actually talking to the filmmakers and the director and the writer. I just love sitting in a room and talking about their vision and also getting to share my vision of a character. And, one of my favorite moments is just even bonding over having ADHD with a director that I worked. And like, so we went off on tangents of like our own lives, but that was really, really helpful, and it helped inform where both of us were also personally coming from and where each of us were putting our own aspects to the character and the history and the relationships for the story. And yeah, and it's something where I know that my identities will always inform not only the choices that I make in what my character does, but also just the implicit things of the story and of projects, of what my character is even thinking about, how my character is relating to other people or environments in the story. It's not just what exactly do I do or what action do I take. Yeah.
You want to go deeper to more of the character like backstory, and do you enjoy analysis, like text analysis work,
I
like when
do.
you
Yeah.
do?
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
yeah, because that is very internal, and that is very like, let
Yeah.
me think. And so much of film, would you say a lot of the
Mhm.
work you have done is like film on camera work, or is it really is various?
It's been film, feature, short, commercial. I started in commercial, print, modeling, dancing. It's been, and then now also dance in film. So I'm working on two different dance narratives, which is specific storytelling through movement. And that's combining all my favorite things in one, in a different way without any voice. And that's been a whole other like really wonderful addition to my art and something that's made me love acting even more and appreciated it. But yeah, it's just understanding the character's objective with the scene, with the overall text, with the whole story. Like that really, that's such a crucial element to getting a deeper understanding to the character.
I think one of the reasons too I love this bringing up this question is, and maybe it's just for my own catharsis, but I feel like a lot of actors approach something, especially an audition, where like, how do I get it right? How do I show the casting director what they want? And what the casting director wants is just for you to be an authentic human and make their job easier by just being what they're looking for. Like they're not and they may not even know what they're looking for till they see that person too. And I feel like I've talked to a lot of casting people where they are like, they try to be more inclusive too, where they're like, they'll go out of their way to like, I can't remember his name, but I think their office did Jane the Virgin. And probably also being a queer man, he has a different perspective as, in his own intersectionality. But he would be like, if I read something that's written as a man, but I'm like, a butch woman could play this, he wants to call them. And so I think, especially when we don't ever see ourselves represented, sometimes, and like auditioning is, I don't know how you two feel, but I feel like I forget how to be an actor when I audition. I'm just like, I do all this, like, I can, like, if I'm in class or I'm in a show, break down the scene, I'm like, I'll live into it, bring myself. And then again, audition, I'm like, they want me to appear a certain way and hit my line and have eye lines on either side of the camera. And I think that's what's important to remember is like, and I think text analysis is like really awesome because the three of us could literally read the same text and we're going to have three different analyses. Um, and like you said, it's a collaborative process too. So it's like when you're cast, the director wants you because of who you are. And then that's an opportunity, especially if you're with people who are a little bit, especially I think probably on like films, TV moves really fast. So you never know. But like where they're like, hey, let's talk about it. We can work it out a little bit more. So I think it's just a reminder to people listening that even if it's like the identity is not being represented, you still have your lived experience that shapes who you are. And I think, at least I do it, where I'll edit. Like I'm like I have to edit myself because it's not what they're looking for, but I don't know what they're looking for.
Exactly. Control what you can control and do your best. The rest is, whew, you're right. You just,
I was about to say,
Including
put that on a shirt.
Ooh.
The rest is
It'll be the name of this episode. The rest is ooh. With like the O's at different
the rest is
sizes.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, yes. Oh, yes. No, it's you like bring up such an important point with auditions because and with acting as a whole because it's such an oxymoron to be an actor, to be an like to act is to not act, to be. And yeah, I think especially with self-tapes, there's such a big difference between self-tapes and in-person auditions. You get different things and very vastly different experiences. And one of the reasons why I love, like, I do not take for granted whenever I get an in-person audition because you really get to utilize the full space and have physical presence as an audience. But then yeah, like with the self tapes, you just basically have a reader and a camera and lights, and that's pretty much it. But that also is often, or like most like the experience on set as well. So it is a good preparation for what you're going to be getting if you book it, and also you don't get that physical aspect as much.
Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons because like it's great that like self tapes I think also make it more accessible, right? To whether people are working or they can't afford to live in major cities, or maybe they have like a chronic disability where they're like I don't have the spoons to go, and so there's like benefits to that. But then there's also, I know SAG is like trying to make self tapes and has passed some rules, but I feel like there's also this weird expectation of like, no, I have to be line perfect. I have to be memorized. I have to like, but if you're in person and you mess up, the casting directors never care. They're like, oh, take it back. You're fine. So I feel like self tapes sometimes take me longer because, or at least especially when they were first really like all over the place, or like, like picking up. Now they're, I feel like, pretty standard, but sometimes, and people would be like, oh, you have to have like this equipment. And like one of my friends said some casting director workshop, like the casting person was like, oh, if I see like a sliver of your like door frame, I'm not even going to watch your tape. And I'm like, so because we live in apartments, like how are people in New York doing this? Like we have bigger apartments than them. And it's like, especially, this is like a tangent, but the worst I think are commercial self tapes because they want so many actions. And I'm like, you're going to see my whole apartment. I can't like vacuum and then mop and do this in front of my little like, at the time I had like a collapsible like background thing.
I've had more restrictions in terms of background with commercial than with theatrical. So definitely like the standard blank wall, nothing behind. But with theatrical, there's definitely been more room and flexibility. And I think that also because there's more flexibility with bringing in like the expansiveness of the character that you're portraying.
Yeah. Something I think is interesting, just because I'm not dealing with it. So I'm like, what's it like auditioning for teenage boys?
Oh, it's a wild experience. I just turned 30 last week and a half ago. So now I am a 30-year-old auditioning for teenage boys as young as 14. Um, yeah, as young as 14, 15, around that age. And I'm also a very petite person. I'm about 5 feet. I'm 5 feet tall. Legally, I'm 5 feet tall. And so, and also like I have Asian complexity. Don't take that for granted either. Thank you to my ancestors. So I know that, you know, physically, with physicality, I can look young. In terms of like the character development, actually feel like I get to have this wonderful opportunity of reliving my teenage years in this fictional world that I didn't get to have, and that I also really, really disliked and struggled as a very closeted teenage kid myself. I wasn't out until I was in college. So that was it's been actually a really wonderful experience, even if these roles, they don't necessarily say mask person or cis person for this role, but as a trans mask person auditioning for a boy or a guy, it does feel like there is a level of feeling seen and validated in ways that I never was, or I never even validated myself back then. Yeah, and then there's also moments where, you know, you do get the imposter syndrome of being a trans mask person and understanding that I don't have that lived experience as a cis man and also as a cis boy. So do I understand that experience? And then it's a full cycle, and then I go back to being like, well, I'm still in the audition room. The casting director still wanted to see me, so you know, these are the identities that I hold. This is what I'm going to put into the character. And if I book it, there are reasons why I booked it. If I didn't book it, I just wasn't right for the role.
Correct. You know what you did? You got out of your head and that thought went, ooh.
Woo! Or
Foo.
foo.
Ooh. Yeah, I love that. I was wondering, like, as I was asking, I'm like, is it like an affirming experience? And that's really cool that it gives you an opportunity to explore, kind of relive those years. Because it's interesting because Bex Taylor Klaus just recently played a teenager in Re-Election. And part of me is like, do people just not know what trans masculine people look like? Because I do think we get hit a little bit with the trans found of youth, you know?
Yeah, I think there is a level of, you know, there's a delicate balance of not infantilizing transmasculine people, especially if like we're significantly older than this teenage boy that we're portraying. You know, and that often has to do with like how the team is treating this talent as well. So I hope that that experience was very positive and affirming for Bex.
I hope so too. And a lot of times they do cast 18 to look younger. So I feel like they would rather work with adults. And so I would hope that they like, know that just because I didn't watch Teen Wolf, but apparently there is a character on it and the actor was in her 30s and she played like a teenager for like 10 years or however long the show was on. I think she got them to kill her off or something. And of course the fans were upset, but then she was like, I don't want to play a teenager. So it happens to everybody, right? There's just like some people are perceived to look younger or older. I have to shave for the show I'm in. They let me keep the mustache, so I was like, I need to keep this for dysphoria reasons, but it takes place in the 30s, so I need to shave. But I'm really curious. I'm like, how old am I gonna? Because it happens to like most people who shave, all of a sudden you're like, my brother will look like 15 years younger if he shaves. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think it's like, yeah, like if a person gets cast and like they can do it, they like, they got the role, go off. And also I hope that each person, myself included, is still taken seriously as a 30-year-old person offset.
I think that kind of goes into that, like the segue into the next topic of, advocating for yourself on set. And I think it comes out so many ways, whether it's like reminding people you're like, hey, I'm actually not that 14-year-old. I'm like an actual adult. You need to treat me that way. Or, being as like a trans person on set, because a lot of times we do have to advocate for ourselves and like reminding like, hey, this costume is dysphoric, or those aren't my pronouns, or however it is. And so I'm curious whether it was for your safety or comfort or even just for just more accurate representation. And also, you are an advocate. Like that's what you do as well. I'm just curious, have there been experiences on set where you've had to deal with that, slash maybe any advice you would give to like up and coming trans mask actors or younger trans mask actors who, you know, I mean, even when I was in my 20s, like it was hard advocating for yourself, something you learn over time. But just curious if you have any experiences you want to talk about or share.
Most sets I've always been misgendered at least once, if not more, by one person or more people. And even with some of the best set experiences, there's someone who even accidentally or unintentionally misgenders me. And so it does like it's a little jolting, or it gives me a bit of whiplash even for a second, and I kind of have to kind of go through different check marks of how I'm feeling, both like mentally, emotionally, physically, in my body, of what that experience, like how safe I feel in the moment. And what I do to prepare for that before set, because I'm a mover, because I dance, and now that like I dance more regularly, I value it so much more, is that I make sure that I move before and after set. So moving for me looks like it could be dance, but I also am just a very active, athletic person, and that also like comes with a lot of privilege. I recognize that, and I if I'm not in a dancing headspace, oftentimes I do dance, but like I'll go for a run. I also box. I play ultimate frisbee. I literally do anything and everything that is just moving. So I can like get into my body, I can connect my body to everything else that's happening, and that helps me feel grounded. And so once I do that, I can be on set, and if things happen, I'm kind of already in a grounded place. And if things feel like there's some elevated emotional triggering moments, I make sure that I also have that movement again after set. In addition to that, I do therapy, and like it's not even just like go to therapy. Like I do it to maintain myself as a human being and as an artist, and they go hand in hand, because I can't I can't be an artist. Like I can't be Maze as an artist if I'm not just being Maze as a person in real life. So I go to therapy, and I work through really, really hard things, and some of those things are moments that are really not affirming in my life. So yeah, I've had to uh, like develop safety toolkits for myself. And one of the parts of the toolkit that I discovered was moving. I love writing, so I hope that, or I try to journal, and journaling for me, if I'm on set and something happens, if I don't have my physical journal on me, I will actually take my phone and just physically write in my notes section, and that will still count for me as a journal moment. I also love writing lists, so I'll write like list of everything and anything, even grocery lists, but like for that particular moment, I'll write before what was I feeling, during what was I feeling, after how do I feel. The feeling is not just like hear it in it like in my head or like in my heart, like how do I feel in my entire body. It's kind of like a body scan for me. And then I look for the people on set that I feel safe around, and I try to surround myself with them. And yeah, that also brings me back to community, because I don't want to push myself away from community. It's easier said than done, but like I really want to come back to like that collaboration, and still being grounded and being with other people when we're doing a project together.
I wish I had some of these tools because it reminded me when I first moved to LA before everything shut down, actually, because I moved January 2020. I auditioned for a role on Lucifer and I booked it, and it was for Drunk Guy. So I was seen as a cis guy who was going to be drunk in this one little scene. So I showed up to set. I was he this is so funny where I was like, I wasn't gonna get mad, but I was a little like, but my pronouns are they, them. Why is everyone he, himing me? So it was very interesting because I feel like it was those moments where I did feel still a little caught in like, I wish people were using my pronouns, even though I was playing a he, him character. And I feel like my agents can only do so much to be like, hey, our actor is non binary. They use they, them pronouns. Like, I don't know if they did that. They don't have to do that. But it's just in those kinds of sets where it feels like it's very network or very like quick and you're there for a day for like 2 lines. Like, it's easy to feel very alone. And like, I wish I had like the writing thing or like maybe a ritual before and after to help me combat that moment or that day. I just felt so out of place and really like invisible.
Yeah, I feel like I'm also having like, oh yeah, this situation would have been great. I love the term that you use, like a safety toolkit. Like you have something that you can go to because I I was in a movie MVP. It's about trans, or it's not about trans. But I was a trans veteran, but it's about veterans, and it's through it like an actual. It's about the story of merging vets and players, which is a nonprofit that brings veterans and like sports, like high contact sports players together to give them a place to like basically like have community and therapy from having like high impact jobs, basically. And they included like a trans masked character. This was like before I had any. I was very pre-op, pre-T. I mean, maybe I had just started T, but it was something where I was like, I'm going into a set where like everyone's a veteran but me, because that was a big thing. But they had a trans person because a cis man was going to play that role, but he decided not to do it. He recommended me, and they loved the idea. So I'm like, I'm going in knowing, but it ended up being actually like a really good set and experience. But the amount of anxiety I had before it probably would have been nice if I had a ritual to go to set, because I was like, I don't know what I'm getting myself into. And like I said, it ended up being really lovely. Like everyone from cast to crew, everyone was great. um and there wasn't really any community there at all, so luckily it was a good experience, but I did go into it being like, oh my god, what did I agree to?
Yeah, I kind of just right, right. And it kind of just like makes me really grateful to like conversations like these where we can share our own resources with one another. Like even if in hindsight, like we wish we had that when we were one with like we were younger, we yeah, I'm like shout out to my therapist honestly for helping me develop that safety toolkit. And I'm like, I hope that people either use those ideas or create their own versions of it as well.
Yeah, I think it is really important because even like most of my self-care toolkit, I guess you can say, is related to a character work. And even that alone, people don't teach that. They'll be like, here's how you get into a really dark, heavy, terrible place. And they're like, okay, bye. Like, class is over. It's like, okay, well, now you have to live with it. And I did a Meisner program where we did all this emotional daydream work, and it was so heavy. And like, I was talking to other people in class, and it was affecting their personal lives because they were always just so fried, or just like, someone said something and then they reacted like it was a Meisner moment of like, what do you mean, blah, blah, or like, and then just physically it was really difficult that I think like my emotional instrument shut down a little bit, and I had to kind of like remind my body it was okay and it was safe to feel these things, because everyday people, when a trauma happens, it's once. For actors, it's for 16 hours on set. It's for a month you're working on a play. It's or until you're done with that scene in class. And we don't take, like, we're not really taught, not a lot of people teach how to come out of it and take care of yourself, let alone like how to prepare yourself for like, you know even just like who you can contact on set if something happens. Like I had this girl in one of my classes, the guy she was supposed to be involved with in the movie like misunderstood the relationship, and she didn't know who to turn to. So like that's when, and it took the happening for my teacher to be like, find the AD, like you can call SAG, you can, like, these are the people you can go to. But it's like, why didn't we say this before something happened? Like someone had the tools. So yeah, so it's very important.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And it makes me think like it's both, even more important and also a level of like unfairness that like as people of marginalized identities, transmasculine folks, like we have to like self-soothe. There are the reasons why we have to self-soothe even more is unfair. Um, but yeah, like the importance of having to self-soothe.
Yeah, because even I think when people are just like, "Oh, can I ask a question?" and you're like, "Oh, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? Like, I'm not here to educate. I'm here to."
I already know the question, but ask
Yeah,
away.
because I always feel like it's set. They're at least asking. I don't want it to be awkward if I'm like, no, because I have a part. I have a whole character I have to focus on in a scene, and I'm here to do a job. I'm not here to educate. On the flip side, I feel like you have had some good experiences of having these conversations, and particularly with Give Me an A. So
Hmm.
if you'd love to, I would love if you would love to share. It's fine. We're not gonna edit this out. This is just how my brain
We're
is at
being
the moment.
authentic.
But this is the real thing, people.
That's what people want, okay? They want the real
Yes.
stuff. They want real life.
This is how we are. But yes, if you wouldn't mind sharing, first of all, what Give Me an A is, and then what that experience was like getting to advocate or collaborate, whichever word you feel like is more appropriate, with the creative team.
Oh my gosh, Give Me an A is such a special project to me. It will always be a special project. So it's an anthology feature film of 17 female filmmakers who came together during the overturning of Roe v. Wade and made a feature film in less than 2 months. And yeah, and it was in direct response of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And so I got to be a part of it with a team of, I might be incorrect on like the specific number, but I believe it was like over 700 people on the entire team. We did, I'm pretty sure it was less than 2 months of full entire work, and we filmed it in less than a month, both on the East Coast and the West Coast, like all at the same time. The director that I worked with, shout out Megan Rosati, like she had met with me virtually, and the character that I was playing didn't necessarily call to be a trans person specifically or a cis person. It was just like a person of an experience that understood or had experiences of marginalization. And for me, we had a conversation about our personal experiences and how we related to Roe v. Wade and how each of us have been impacted. So she shared with me, her as a cis woman, how that's impacted, how she was impacted. For me as a trans person with a uterus and body autonomy, gender affirming care, just there was so much that we did have in common, even though I'm a trans person and she's a cis person. And through that conversation, she was so open and welcoming to me, truly like bringing in what I personally have and experience. I played a character that was in a doctor's office. It's quite, oh, what's the word, it was terrifying in terms of like the section that I was in was called Plan C, and it's basically my character goes into a doctor's office and is getting what is called quote unquote Plan C, but Plan C is actually not Plan B. It's actually taking away the ability to even have like uh, to even like care or advocate for yourself with body autonomy. And so it was a twist on what our post Roe v. Wade would actually be, or post the overturning of Roe v. Wade would actually be for people with uteruses. And I was also paired with this ad that had come up with another character that played opposite of me, Quinn. Her character was portrayed as a cis white woman who has all the access to all the medical support, and my character was quite the opposite. But I was also in so much, I almost had like, I was so desperate to be apathetic to this overturning of Roe v. Wade that I chose this Plan C. And the Plan C was to not care about that this was happening. And so that was like the most terrifying part. Um, because of the fact that like I had cared so much, but then I was choosing to take that right away from myself. Yeah, and yeah, it's just the conversation, we just really she really opened up the door for me to, again, it was 17 female filmmakers, so I was the only trans person on set. If not, if only like, if not even like the only trans person on set. I'm not sure if there's any other not out trans person on set, but I was the only out trans person on set. And both her and the other filmmakers and everyone on set gave me so much autonomy and affirmation about still being trans, but still sharing this experience and solidarity with what we were all going through. And that was all of June, July, August of that year of 2022.
Wow. That's really amazing to hear that they gave that space. Because I feel like when that was happening, like any organization posting about it or trying to like get people aware, I feel like transmasculine people were just always left out of the conversation, like completely.
And I'm glad you had a seat. You had a seat at the table. And it sounds like it was super affirming and validating to just have you
Yeah,
be
thank
included in
you.
that,
Yeah,
because it's like, why not? Why wouldn't you have been there?
yeah. During the one of the screenings that we had, and there was a talk back, the lead and executive producer and another director on the film, Natasha Halevi, asked me to also be a part of the talk back. And so I got to like come up on stage as one of the actors and then all of the filmmakers, all of the directors, and stand next to them and share with the audience of how also like I got to like collaborate with the team, and they specifically asked me to share about my experiences and opened it up for that opportunity for me to share like about being a trans mass person on set. And so I very much took that opportunity and did it.
That's great. Now, everyone's different, but are you someone that's like, I understand this is my role, this is, my part right now in being the only person there that represents this specific group? Or are there moments for you sometimes where you do feel a little singled out or a little like in the spotlight?
Yeah, the latter. Yes and yes, yes and yes. Um, that is to say, that was another actually special parts of this project was the fact that Megan and I talked about how, you know, she recognized that that was an additional emotional labor on me. And so didn't put that pressure on me, but understood that, as the only person, this would be my role. And so I do often, I mean, again, my upbringing, I've had to educate and educate so much. There are so many I very much like am in a place in my life where I trust myself depending on like which environments I'm in, which space I'm in, what role I choose to take, if I choose to be the educator because it feels okay in my body, or if I don't have the capacity in the moment and then I just say no. I had to learn that balance of like, I do want to advocate for myself, so I do have to, or like, I want to advocate in general. Like, there is a level of like educating in through the lens of transformative justice, having conversation. And also, there's a level of having boundaries and self worth and knowing your limits and taking care of yourself too, and not putting so much labor and responsibility on yourself, because I've also had that. And I've also put that on myself. So finding that like balance, it goes back to the checklist. And I have to do that. I have to do that in most spaces. And it's become so much easier for me. Like I can honestly go through checklists in my head in split seconds now, and so it'll pretty much feel like instinct, where if someone asks a question, I've already gone through the checklist in that moment, and I'll either answer or share that I don't have capacity, or that's not a question that like I can answer right now. But the work was a lot of practice in the last few years, and there's like so much trial and error, so much trial and error. And that's not to say where I still slip up, where I do put too much, or I wish I could put more in. But yeah, I'm definitely in a place where I experience both, and I have to choose what feels right, and if they still align with my values to the community that I'm in. Who am I surrounded with? Who also is in the room with me that you know, is there a level of privilege that I hold that I could also be an advocate as well? And like, there's so many questions that you can ask yourself.
Oh, yes. Where can we watch Given A?
Apple TV, or
Apple
Amazon Prime.
TV.
Yeah,
Yes, or Amazon
yeah, it's
Prime.
it's horror and sci-fi and anthology feature, and it has really, really wonderful, brilliantly talented people in it.
Kind of thinking to like the future of like the industry. They just announced like the tax incentives, who's getting them. So people are hoping, fingers crossed, industry is going to pick up. But as the industry starts to pick up, I'm curious, where do you feel like the future is like of the industry is going? And are there any changes that you hope to see, even if those may not be at the forefront? And that can be related to anything we've talked about.
Yeah, I mean, specifically with like trans mask representation, I both like, as we all know, there's such a anti-trans rhetoric that's happening right now that has impacted the safety of so many people's lives. Safety, art, livelihoods, mental health, and fear, just overall fear. I also, to that same point, see within our own communities, there's a growing and, if not like equal, amount of mobilization and motivation for more queer content, trans content, and the necessity for that content, but specifically like from our own community members. And, and I see like the spread of that, the representation is not just like on film, through film. It's through social media, including like TikTok, Reels, advocacy at Comic-Con, dance, theater. Like there's within our own communities, seeing a lot of making sure that like we are taking care of ourselves and taking care of each other. I I'm I'm seeing that, like, and I'm holding on to that, like that part of hope of, this is what's keeping me going, this is what's keeping me alive, because like my community, like our community together, like we're sticking with one another, we're making sure that like no one's left behind. And yeah, there's something about like with more, with a lot more queer content, but specific, like, especially it's not always nuanced, and that's often because it's written by people of not that experience or identities. It's uh, there's been more conversations about queer content, about queerness, about transness. So I see that, and so there is, which heightens the level of anti-trans rhetoric. And also with that added additional misrepresentation, there is more of a need for authentic representation. And so the importance of like how the industry is shifting is like who is, and again, we've talked about this so much on our panel of like who is in the room, who is all like not just on screen, but who's behind the screen, who's working on the team before, during, after set. Not only should there be a trans person on the project, but there should be more than one trans person. It shouldn't just be about the one trans person with that responsibility of representation. Like there should be an entire room. It also shouldn't even be a question of, or even a topic that we have to talk about, that, oh, we have the trans people, or we have, with any other identities, we have the person of color. Yeah, it should just be that should just be. It shouldn't have to be something where this was mind blowing that we even had it. because what we're all trying to do is we're all trying to make stories, we're all trying to make art, and that could, like, we could if that wasn't like stigmatized, if our identities weren't stigmatized, we could really spend so much more time just making the art together.
I love that. It's similar to what Brian was saying too, of not necessarily like the idea of like the industry, right? Like the big motion picture companies, because it's 1932, uh, but making the space for us, but our own communities rising up. Because I've been hearing this for a while, that it feels like the indie film scene is going to have like a new renaissance, because this is like, you know, people are going to start making their own, which I haven't dug into the tax incentives too much to see how much has been allocated to indie films. I saw how much major blockbusters got, which was a lot of money, but I'm sure there's different brackets of qualifications, I would hope. I don't know anything about politics. It's fine. It does really feel like we need to make our stories. And I think that's what's something that's been really exciting about the trans panel. And I don't even know if I actually like foresaw this happening or thought it was going to happen, was just our own community is just like starting to grow out of it, where we're finding more like people who write, people who direct, people who are DPs, and it's just finding, like, we have to find each other so we can be the people in the room. And so hopefully through this podcast and more panels too, we'll keep growing that, and more people can connect and collaborate so we can keep highlighting our stories. Because my hope is that as trans stories continue to come up, we are not once again left out of the conversation, or just one type of transmasculine story is told, which tends to be like white binary transmasculinity, similar to, you know, the way transfemininity is mostly represented.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's like, again, going back to like intersectional, is like there is more trans representation, trans mask representation, and also with intersectional identities, it's a lot of white trans representation. So, you know, that is important, and I love seeing that. And also more trans, like trans representation, like trans of color, trans people of color. Yeah, and like more trans joy too, specifically written by trans people, because it doesn't translate the same literally trans doesn't translate the same well the same or well at all if it's written by a cis person.
Yeah, it hits different. It just lands differently when, yeah, I think about that when like I'm narrating and it's like I'm narrating a Latina trans mask character in the book. Like it's just gonna resonate differently and come out differently than if a white trans mask person narrated it, you know?
But and it is something too where it's like, I'm sure people can do their research, but we're not research projects, we're people, and we can bring that lived experience. And I think coming out is so different in different cultures, and we don't get to see it. And there's also just a lot of misrepresentation of cultures. Like everyone assumed, like, you know, when it comes to transness in Persian culture, it's how it's like in Iran, it's viewed the same way as homosexuality, and it's not. And no one knows that. Everyone's just like, this must have been awful. And I'm like, no, they were way more accepting than my white family. Like, you know, um, so I do think and it's funny because I feel like I don't remember what they won for. I think it was an Asian team, but they basically thanked white men for making every other story seem interesting, because we just have seen the same white dude story over and over again, that the minute someone's like a little different, audiences are like, oh my God. Like, you know, it's like the first half of Parasite is just people living in Korea. And it's so riveting because it's a culture we're not familiar with. And we got to see something so crazy different because we just see the same white American like mayonnaise culture over and over and over again.
Which is what we're back to right now. We're back to that right now. There's been a huge retracting of those queer roles and trans roles, but like you were saying, I think it's going to even out and eventually find its way back. It's just right now, like what you said earlier, Yas, is like the indie scene of it all is where I think a lot of our voices are going to be heard and a lot of our stories are going to be told. But I like what you said too, Maze. You're looking forward to seeing more stories of joy. And I feel like something of joy for you is also dancing. And I just want to get a little bit, if you can, just give us a little bit about what movement and using all facets of your body to tell a story, like what that is like for you.
Gosh, I dance is like one of my biggest loves right now. I mean, anything creative, like just all of it. But I said earlier in the podcast that I have loved acting even more so than I already did, and I loved it so much. But even more so, and I've appreciated my art as an actor more because of dance. I just started dancing a year ago, and now I've been dancing regularly since December. I'm about to be in my third show, and then a couple dance narratives. And, as a person who is in a body with a lot of trauma, and also specifically with the transmasc experience with gender euphoria, there's trauma with gender, trauma in my personal life. Like I never knew how to be in my body, and even after top surgery, I from top surgery till to when I started dancing, yes, I felt so free in my body. I thought I felt, and I was free in those moments and how I moved. But as soon as I started to like really connect the somatic part, it's translated into my personal life of, and helps me with the safety toolkit of, what I'm feeling first comes from how my body is actually responding before what I feel here or in my head. I actually trust more of what my physical body uh, does. And dancing has really helped that. Actually, it was my therapist who recommended that as a hobby first. So it started as a hobby as well. That I'm an artist. I love being creative. I'm also an athlete. So Maze, you potentially could look into dancing. That seems like an avenue that might be really, really helpful and you would enjoy. And I did. And I like fell in love with it within 2 minutes. And then within the first 3 months, like I saw changes in my personal life of knowing how to trust my gut. Um, and my gut is all about like literally like where do I feel in my gut? Where do I feel in my stomach when different things happen? Like, so for example, on set, if there's something that happened to me or around me, not just what am I thinking and how should I feel, but what did my stomach do? And trusting like that feeling. And with that, that's helped me with character development. That's helped me like be a better listener to my scene partners, be a better listener to myself. And I have found a whole new relationship to my body post op. Already being post op and being like, I love my body. I feel connected to my body. There's another deeper level of connection that I have with my body where yeah, it's I almost separated. This is my art space of being in my body. This is my personal space being in my body. But then with dance, I got to really connect the two. And yeah, and then I get to really tell stories where when I'm acting, the way that I use my body has transformed. So the physicality of acting has changed for me. And then when I'm in dance, the amount of like still being an actor, I put so much like storytelling in my dance. So I get to utilize both sets of skills for them. And yeah, I've also trusted, and love the process of working with other dancers. I've gotten such an incredible opportunity to work with classically trained dancers who some of them are actors and some of them are not actors, but they are dancers. They are technical dancers, and they have been so generous with me and have challenged me. Like I have grown so much as a dancer technically and as a storyteller because we've also collaborated together. They've learned from me, I've learned from them, and all the projects, all the shows that I've done, have had a mix of people that, myself included, as being like, I didn't necessarily start as a dancer and now I get to like call myself a dancer, and they had like the opposite experience. But it was more of just like, how do we learn from one another? How can we grow together? And also, because we're dancing, like I've done duets, trios, quartets, whole ensemble. I'm about to be in an 8-person show where there will be a variety of different pieces. And yeah, it's really just, can you listen? Can you be present with this space and this person? I could go off about it. I really, really love it. Yeah.
It's really it's really nice. It makes me happy seeing how passionate you are about it. And I think something it's really awesome is to have transmasculine representation in dance, because I do musicals, so I do dance. And I got into dance in college because I didn't want to do ballet with the other girls when I was a kid. And I want to do martial arts, and I'm always like, damn it, I could have been like, if only, because I do genuinely love it. But it's also really great that you're having this affirming experience, because like even in college I was like, guys would be like, cis men would be in these like baggy shorts, like you couldn't see anything, and then teachers would keep being like, you have to wear tighter clothes to me, and I'm like, you can see my lines. I don't have to wear tight clothes in order. If the cis men can wear baggy clothes in jazz class, I don't have to wear tights. And I'd have to do it for like the final in ballet, but I'm like, I don't have to dress this way. And it's hard, and I feel like I'm probably not the only trans mass person, especially like in Persian culture. Like I was dancing before I could walk, so. But some cultures, there is the idea of like, well, men don't dance, right? And then that affects everybody, not just trans masculine people. But that's why I'm like, this is exciting, because it's one of those things where we can discover and feel our gender through any medium of art. It's not, there's no such thing as like, this isn't only feminine art, this isn't only masculine art. Art is art, and it's an opportunity to explore ourselves more.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, absolutely. That's something that I like really, I know, like one of the questions that you had asked that like sat with me for the last couple days was, I'm trying to remember how you worded it, but like, what is something that what could I bring into the community in terms of affirming spaces? And I was thinking about like, oh, like that experience of being a transmasculine mover, transmasculine dancer, or just like person of trans experience. And how can we be in our bodies and also move, and like connect with ourselves? Yeah, because like there's a level of unhinged that I have unlocked for myself that I love, and it would be such a joy to like share and like help unlock for people.
You should do it. That sounds so much fun, like a trans dance space. Because I mean, so many trans people of all experiences. It's sometimes, I when I was in the trans choir and I was trying to help with social, a lot of people were like, I don't want pictures taken of myself, or like, I don't want to look in the mirror. Like some people have bad days, and it can be really hard when you're struggling with that to love your body. I'm sure that's true for many people, but especially trans people, there's an extra thing. So I support it. I say do a trans dance workshop. That sounds like it'd be so much fun.
Yeah, that's 2026, man. Like, yeah, intentions.
Okay, all
Com-
right. I
you are
love
both
that. Send,
invited.
send us the.
Yes.
Thank you. I was gonna say
Yeah.
send us where we need to sign
Yes.
up. We'll be there.
I will like truly like personally invite
Gorgeous.
both of you. Yeah, because that is something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. That would be so much fun.
Yeah.
I know you're gonna do it.
Mm,
So that's
thank you.
perfect. I love that. I think we could like wrap this up, but this maze, like again, always the things you have to say, so insightful, so thoughtful, and just again, always a pleasure to have these discussions and dialogue with you. So thank you again for joining us. I want to ask something a little another, why not? More sweetness to end on. A happy memory. This can be recent, this can be creative, personal, it can be trans-related, not trans-related, it can be complex or simple and mundane. But is there anything that you want to share on that topic?
Oof. I'm gonna play my Libra card and say I have two happy memories because I can't choose between the two, but I can be decisive that I have specific two. So one is definitely art related, and it's a little bit of a plug. It's the dance performance that I'm about to be in. We performed last year with a slightly different cast, and they brought it back. I'm with the same dance company, and they brought it back with a slightly different cast. And so they've changed a little bit about it, but it was last year's production. It was my first dance performance ever, and it was like, yeah, first like professional dance performance. And it was specifically and it's the same theme this year, and we're repeating it every year, we hope, that it's a queer storytelling in motion. So what it is that there's eight of us, eight artists, eight dancers, and each of us share verbally a piece of a story in our life about queerness. So I got to share a snippet of what my top surgery journey was like. There was a specific theme that I focused on, but yeah, I got to share that, and then there was a choreographed piece to it. And so for us, it was like my piece was a combination of, I had a solo in it, and then it also turned into a full ensemble piece. And then all of us, there was like a mix of, duet, trio, quartet, full ensemble. I got to dance other people's stories as well, but this was an entire queer storytelling dance piece. So yeah, that was like the moment I got to dance, like I got to dance my own top surgery journey. And that moment was actually one of the core memories of me connecting my life and my art and my body to myself, like during the show. And also I loved the cast, the cast that we had. Like, we have such a special like mix of a new cast this year, and lots of returning people. We're in rehearsal, like deep in rehearsal now, and we're creating like really great new memories. And also, like, our first cast last year, I think it's because it was like my first show and the memories that we had. I will always be so grateful for that. And they became family. Like, I'm even the choreographer, artistic director, storytelling director. I get coffee with them, and they just check in on me. The storytelling director, he feels like the gay dad or the gay uncle that I never had. And he and I just, like, we have our specific coffee place that we go to, and we'll meet up and we just talk about life. We just like check in, and it feels like family, even if, throughout the year after the season is done, and they have other productions going on as well, that we're still making sure that, like, we're human. So that was one of my favorite memories in an artistic and personal way. And then also, this recently, my 30th birthday, I set an intention for myself to integrate my life more, and also kind of doing a bit of a scan of what do I want for this new decade. And one of that was like, okay, I want like more integration. I want to share, because I'm in so many different communities, not just acting, not just transmasculine communities, but the adoptee community, like the adoptee advocacy communities, the Asian community, then specifically Asian men community, because I have an entire community with that. I wanted to, and I want to continue doing that. I hope to continue doing that more. Try it out, of like both gather some people in my life and also lean into like silliness, regardless of like how old I'm turning. 30 is this, yeah, I understand, like 30 is still young, but like regardless of like, this is a new decade, so therefore, it's another level of quote unquote maturity. Just lean into the silliness and the whimsical of life, and just go back to like actually go back to like my boyhood. I feel like that's what I'm noticing and hearing from people, that this decade is all about going back to like either going back to that or finding the hobbies that you did really love as a kid.
There you
Yeah,
go.
I feel like I can agree to that. Yeah, I feel like I definitely started doing that more.
Without the foolishness of being a young teen boy.
Yeah.
But
Right, exactly. Yeah.
yeah, but keeping the play alive.
Yeah, it's a nice balance of like, oh, we can go back and start playing and doing stuff, but then also like having the wherewithal of like that toxic person, I don't have the energy. No, you're like, so it's a good balance. But this was such an incredible conversation. I mean, I knew it was going to be, and it's always just so great having these conversations. And hopefully, before the end of the year, we can have this in person and hang
In person.
and do human things when we're not all so busy and apparently sick.
Now that it's
but
recorded, we that's the official intention.
That's
set.
true. This is in a form of writing, I guess, in recording. But yeah, thank you so much. And really quick, I know we'll be tagging you on our socials, but where can people find you to keep up with your projects?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'm on Instagram, pretty much only Instagram at Hi There, I'm Maze. I also pop in and out of TikTok, but my primary social media, I try not to go on any other social media as often, is Instagram. So it's Hi There, I'm Maze.
Well, thank you so much. Again, this was incredible. There's so many great wisdom nuggets. I don't know if that's a phrase.
Yeah.
And we end on wisdom nuggets.
Woo!
Yeah.
Foo!
Foo, yes. It's all just foo.
And we're out. Bye. Next time on InfoView, it's our 3-part Very Trans holiday special. Ho, ho, ho! In part 1, we talk with Mars Dixon, a multi-hyphenate punk artist, about Trans Santa, a nonprofit connecting trans youth with wish list gifts. In part 2, we read real letters. And in part 3, your hosts explore why trans folks are still missing from holiday movies. Make sure you're subscribed to InfoView wherever you get your podcasts. And if you liked this episode, please rate and review us. See you next time.